Good evening, everybody, and welcome to DIA and our Readings in Contemporary Poetry series. My name is Megan Whitco. I'm one of our curatorial associates here, and it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to tonight's reading, which is the third of the four that we're doing this season. DIA's Readings in Contemporary Poetry series was reinstated in 2011 with a partnership with our series curator, Vincent Katz. And these readings are on a monthly basis, pretty much, and we try to highlight commonalities amongst poets and bring their work into a larger conversation with one another. It's my pleasure to welcome our two poets for this evening. We have Trinidad and Joanna Fuhrman, and I want to thank them both for graciously agreeing to be a part of the series tonight. We also want to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, whose generous support helps make these Monday evenings at DIA possible. And we also want to give a special thanks to Brooklyn Brewery, who helped by supplying the cold beverages for this evening, and to our full staff at DIA, in particular Max and Patrick in our IT department, as well as Blair and Claire, who've been running front of house, as they've all greatly helped coordinate this evening. And before I turn it over to Vincent, I want to just give you the schedule of events. So following our first reader, we'll have a short 10-minute introduction. If you'd like to use the restroom or grab another beer or check out the books available on the book cart, that's a perfect time to do it. And after that, we'll resume with our second speaker. So it's now my pleasure to welcome Vincent Katz, who will be introducing our first reader for this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you all for coming out tonight, braving the freezing rain that we've grown accustomed to. And as Megan alluded to, we have one more reading this spring. It's going to be on May 12th. It's going to be Charles Burkus and Ariana Reines, so please come back for that. We want to end the season with a bang, and I think they're the right people to do it. Tonight we have a great reading for you. Joanna Fuhrman will read first, followed by Trinidad. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Joanna Fuhrman. Joanna Fuhrman was born in New York City and has lived and studied in Austin and Seattle. She's taught poetry at the University of Washington, in homeless shelters, and in public schools. She's the author of 4 books of poetry: Freud in Brooklyn, Ugh Ugh Ocean, and Moraine, all from Hanging Loose Press, and Pageant from Alice James Books in 2009, as well as the chapbook The Emotive Function, published by Least Weasel in 2011. She teaches creative writing at Rutgers University and lives in Brooklyn. The first poem in Joanna Fuhrman's first book begins, quote, "A blue arm stuck out of the train's window, and a cat-shaped figure wavered, suspended over moving ground," end of quote. From this modest and somewhat surrealist opening, her poem arrives at a moment of wonderful mundanity. She gives us details of wet hair, drinking cola from a straw, a flute on the radio. But the drama is certainly outside the window, both in and outside the silently passing train. There is a dreamlike quality, but the conclusion, as in many of Furman's poems, packs a punch that is beyond realistic. It gains power through its drop to reality from the metaphysical zone in which the poet observes it. Her lingo is meritorious, to steal a word from the title of another early poem. Furman speaks in her poems as a person from a specific part of New York City. A linguist could probably pinpoint the block. I love the way she uses us instead of we in the line, quote, "By the 5 and dime, us brains hung," end of quote. And the fact that she identifies herself not as a freak or a geek or a nerd, but as a brain. Her pride has unified her colleagues, even as they drift apart. In a more recent poem from her collection Pageant, Furman writes, quote, "Try to drape yourself in Edwardian post-punk glory. Look into the mirror. Erase the idea of what you thought of as a self." End of quote. More and more, Furman's poems are attempts to make sense of the senseless. Well, this goes back to that first poem. The world she observes is crazy, and her lines try to put that insanity into palpable form. Her tools are humor, grammar, sex, and television. But we feel something lurking behind that as well, or beyond it, and that something is breaking out in the poems that compose her new manuscript, The Year of Yellow Butterflies, from which she will be reading tonight. Please join me in welcoming Joanna Fuhrman to DIA.
Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. I'm going to read a few new poems and then a piece of a long poem from the book-length manuscript, from The Year of Yellow Butterflies, and then I'm going to end with a piece of a collaboration I've been doing with Tony Simon. The letter. You asked me to write you a letter for tenure. I handed over a fossilized pear. Better than words, I thought, until you left the conference room, inchoate bunny rabbits falling from your eyes. As in most meetings, I was eating a marshmallow shaped like myself, which meant time was a little slower and space a little bigger than you'd think. I knew I needed to start over. Something had gone wrong when we started calling our undulating nexus of winding ideations and spastic limbs an institution instead of a school. But what else could we say after the donors replaced the windows with x-rays of their babies' rebooted brains? I should have known the pear would fall to ash if touched. I should have known the pear was too beautiful to be a symbol or argument for anything but itself, its own dry peariness. All afternoon, the committee circled the black fruit, gossiping. I wanted them to embrace its bare fragility, its dry, delicate matter. I wanted them to see the pear's darkness, not just with their bulging eyes, but with every atom, every mercurial cell of their alien and ailing flesh. Hexagon. Susan thought Bobby would fall in love with her when she wore her tutu decorated with toy tarantulas. But Bobby was busy sewing a ball gown, the color of music, hoping that when he wore it, Billy would love him. Billy wore a cape with boxing gloves attached, but they were too small for his bulbous palms, and he wasn't sure who he wanted to punch. Liza said she wanted to be punched. She was wearing a nightgown that made her look like a melting snowman and blue leggings printed with blood-colored stars. But who did the fabric love? What about the thread encircling her pudgy thighs? What color shadow did her left elbow secretly desire? Who would her buttons twist for? What shape could dampen those lips? Song for future books. The book is made of glass, and I look through it and see more books, many glass books. Is someone speaking? A muffled voice is telling me to make soup, which I think means I am loved. What other kind of cup fills itself? Can there be a cup of itself? Outside, a black squirrel has wiggled to the end of a very skinny branch. When the squirrel breathes, the whole tree shakes, as if the squirrel were the soul of the tree. Have you ever felt like such a tree? Not saying I have. Listen to what I am saying, not what I say. Try to fold your memories as if you were handling your mother's underwear, or as if the memories were the creases in her face, your face. Look at your destiny. It's over there, the pink dress pedaling the tricycle, a spirit on wheels, doing a religious wheelie like all the other false gods who haunt your pungent suburb. If you are sleeping, where is your necklace of drool? If you are awake, why does your headache keep sticking its tongue on the frozen pole? If anyone is a fan of the way the past twists its tendrils around all the knobs, let her be the first to throw our hosiery over the glass wall. How long can you hold on to a mummified cat when the building is already burning? Sometimes I just want to use my own hands. Dionysian Sunday. A pain pill with legs fell in with the wrong cloud. Spiral phone cord wrapped, more salt on more knives in the flower pot. An egg with a secret. You rag-faced ingrate, you peeling toad, are you sleeping? What color is your freeway, buttermilk, lifeline, broccoli? Twist your balloon, rub your brain freeze, swallow your through the domino factory, the pig train, the birthing canal, the buttered noodle, the light bulb guts. You loved it so much, your stitching slipped. We loved it so little, our living lipped. Life choice pancake, frontwise ballerina. Stroke your baboon, lug your nose leash, pamper your. So now I'm going to read from a long poem. I'm just going to read excerpts. Yeah, don't worry. So it's around 20 sections, but I'm only going to read a few of them. I'll read like half or something. Okay. It's called From the Year of Yellow Butterflies. And it starts with a couple of quotes. The first one is Frank Bedart. Terrible to dress in the clothes of a period that must end. And the other one is John Ashbery. You must remember that certain things die out for a while so they can be remembered with affection later on. It was the year all the clouds resembled noses. Some were clean buttons, others were dripping with cumulus snot. We miss the variety of previous eras, clouds shaped like the Eiffel Tower or geodesic domes. Once there was a cloud that resembled the schnozzle of a popular reality star. You could see the movement of the celebrity's breath mirrored in its shifts. I tried to stay awake all day and night so I could record its trembles with my cellular phone. I had hoped to post it online, but by the time I realized I'd fallen asleep, the nose cloud had become two separate clouds, two unrelated nose forms, neither of them famous at all. Oh, I forgot to say this is a prose poem. Maybe you could figure that out. It keeps going. It was the year young women wore blue jeans with carefully ripped holes revealing leggings, and in the knees of the leggings, little rips, glimpses of neon paisley tights. In the paisley tights, there were holes, and through these holes, we could see little patches of perfect skin-colored knee makeup. In the knee makeup, there would always be a gap where the real skin would peek out. And in that gap would be another hole, and in it, a surgically implanted transparent window revealing veins. And under the veins, there would be muscles, predictable bones. Inside those bones, we could see little tubes. And inside those tubes, there was the beginning or the end of language. I didn't know which, but I knew it was a kind of happiness, like a crooked line is happy, or like a million crooked lines are even happier. I thought of it as a great yellow swooping, maybe the music of glaciers melting, or mislaid planets slowly readjusting their orbits. It was the year goth, rockabilly manicurists applied mini wigs to women's nails. My wife's nails were blonde, like a young Bridget Bardot. They were half hair, half self-lighting phosphorescent wicks. In the dark, I couldn't tell the difference between my wife's fingers and an ocean of glowing jellyfish. I didn't like or dislike my wife's new nails. They became just another part of her, like the wads of earwax left on the pillow or the glossy lipstick she applied after eating grilled cheese. It was the year people liked to make up words. My mother coined the word for blinking underwater, and I coined the word for sobbing with a cold. My father's word for ugly flowers looked like a sick bird on the page. I could never pronounce my sister's word for nonviolent murder. On the train, I heard two strangers using Kate's word for global warming-induced sleeping. What was the word for not remembering a word? Some words were oddly addictive. What was that word we said for hours on the beach? I remember afterwards, our mouths had a dry feeling, like the taste after chewing old gum. It was the year those photographs appeared everywhere. Big-toothed Americans smiling next to naked, hooded, bound, dark men. We'd see the images printed on t-shirts, embossed on popcorn cartons, and caught in the silver cinematic underskin of our eyelids. We thought that the image would cause a rearrangement of our dormant atoms, that the lion sleeping in our waterbed would wake and burn a rapturous path out of its oceanic nap. Instead, the powder on our nacho chips stayed the same, blunt orange. The ballet dancers remained perched, spinning forever on their lovely, bloody toes. It was the year no one could tell the difference between a poem and a resume and a poem. I was awarded a job as a poet in residence at an insurgent branding firm. I wrote odes to the CEO on my cell phone and emailed guzzles to the VP. I loved the job because it included a free lunch with a salad bar and unlimited kale-flavored hummus. In each poem I wrote for the job, there was another secret poem embedded in the first, invisible unless one touched it. I was willing to let anybody touch it. All I wanted in exchange was a goddamn kiss. It was the year everyone stopped having sex. It started with a scholar in Beijing. She wrote a blog post about the pleasures of swimming rubber-suited through mud. Before long, an Australian electropop, hip-hop, anti-sex anthem skinned apart the charts. Next thing we knew, a San Paulo men's group installed metal alarms in their tongues. Surveillance cameras appeared under the mirrored ceilings of Vegas hotels and inside the lacy polyester panties of mixed-race cultural studies graduate students. There were so many ways of not having sex that actually having sex appeared old-fashioned, passé but not yet quaint. It was more like a fake wood-paneled station wagon than a peeling silver-plated egg cup on the shelf of a Perladersburg cafe. I remember I was in the 12th grade when people started having sex again. It was all at once. Maybe it was the charged air from Zimbabwe's nuclear meltdown or the change in frequency. of the new satellites circling the moon. But somehow, we all felt the need to touch each other and no longer remembered we had stopped. It was the year everyone wore an eye patch as a form of language. If it covered your left eye, it meant you regretted breakfast, or your childhood was full of big-toothed bullies, or you wanted to go swimming, but the water had permanently frozen after the chemical spill. Over your right eye, it meant you felt strong enough to swallow the bread basket whole. Your funeral was prepaid at birth. Your cat could read your mind and call the landlord to file a complaint about the broken oven that kept eating your memories and spitting them into the compost bin. I tried to wear 2 eye patches as a bikini top one summer, but my nipple hair kept flying away from me. You wore an eye patch as a jockstrap to an outdoor sex club, but everybody laughed when you took off your shorts. I once covered my whole body and face with eye patches, so I looked like a monster made of eye patches, a messy onion of dirty, flapping eyes. It was the year preteen girls started wearing padded bras over their t-shirts. The lingerie was useful in its way. You could store cell phone chargers and banned novels in there, or you could hide a cherry lollipop for an after-school snack. Parents were horrified. Some mothers hid their daughter in their pocketbooks so they could carry them to work. A father locked his son in a Lego panopticon. Another chained his daughter to her desk. Middle school classes grew smaller each day. The hallways were so quiet you could hear the baby rats snoring in the cafeteria walls. Soon, no one was left in the building but the 8th grade math teacher and me. He was a burly man and wore a live muskrat as a mustache. It was a broken umbrella in his hand, not a cane. We wrote problems on the blackboard and breathed in the chalk fumes to keep ourselves amused. Did he notice me, staring down into the cavity on my chest, into the galaxy inside my bra? It was the year our disappointment was shaped like a lake, and we all swam in it. And your hair was the color of a fish's movement, and my eyes floated in my forehead, so they were perpendicular, and the world tilted as we tilted, and the sky was full of a pale blue language we called home, and we named our songbird Money, and we sang, "Here, Money, here." And like any other songbird, she looked right at us and fled. It was the year everyone had dreams about nuclear holocausts. In Laura's dream, the sun turned the color of pomegranates. In Max's, he hid under a couch with his pet hamster, Sam. Clara stood alone on the roof. Ken ate a cupcake shaped like a mushroom cloud while his friends joked about the end of the world. From what I remember of my dream, the streets were covered in sneaker tongues, angular wounds, burnt moss. I cried on the sidewalk with blue sirens. What I remember might not have been my actual dream. It might be a memory of a promo for a TV movie, the one they advertised during breaks of the primetime soaps. My mother said I wasn't old enough to watch. It was the year we liked to wear opaque sunglasses so we could walk together in clarifying darkness and hear the clicking of light switches and feel the shag rug on our blistered feet and smell the nitrogen circumnavigating the distracted air. We were finally able to understand the difference between here and when, finally able to touch the sinuous yellow gap between the meaning of now and the feel of it. So I'm going to end with a collaboration. So for a long time now, my friend Tony Simon, who's here, and I have been working together. Tony creates these amazing little gods out of paper. They're around this big, and they're little sculptures. And we take them different places. We've done one in Chinatown, a bunch in Brooklyn, different places in Brooklyn. This one we took to Madeline Ginz's studio, the Reversible Destiny studio. We started this before she passed away, and then we later had to go back to photograph a few more things after she died. So I want to dedicate this to her. And there are images in it from the Reversible Destiny project. We took it at her studio, so they're sort of like posed in front of posters. I don't know how, anyway, you'll see. And this is Bastet's journey. Oh wait, what happened to the title page? Oh, okay. So it's called The Heir's Home. I have no memories of my life as a fire, all the rooms empty to the same hallway. Every space is someone's home, even if it's just the heir's home, breath's tender, secret quarters. But what if there is no space left? Whose home is time? Whose house is made of time? Who feels at home in time? Whose wicked minutes can balance another's flexible skin? I didn't mind being watched, or so I claimed. The apartment building's multiplying windows were my superego, limiting breath. I was more and less than human, half God, half cat, half idea, half sack of cells. We replaced our friends with cardboard models of friends. This helped with the smiling schedule. They never left us, even when the wind howled and the chickens cried. After the friends wore out, we replaced them with flickers of ideas. I was a shadow under the nose of a theory. You were a sun with a missing tongue. Have you ever seen a bird need therapy? They just chirp and are done with it. If I lean against a minute, will anything finally burst? If I were the other self again, would I still hear the air? The skin on my breath forms a ladder over the sky. The slippery babies we hide in our pores don't need us. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to introduce David Trinidad. David Trinidad grew up in Los Angeles, lived in New York City, and now resides in Chicago, where he teaches creative writing at Columbia College. His books of poetry include November, Answer Song, Plasticville, The Late Show, Dear Prudence, New and Selected Poems, and Peyton Place, a haiku soap opera. The last four published by Turtle Point Press. Trinidad is the editor of A Fast Life, the collected poems of Tim Dlugos, published by Nightboat Books in 2011. From seemingly mundane materials, Barbie, Valley of the Dolls, Peyton Place, The Patty Duke Show, David Trinidad has fashioned a body of poetry that seems ever more substantial for all its apparent fragility. And that fragility extends beyond its materials to its emotional life as well, in which readers are enmeshed in all the contradictions, desires, and fears of a typical young person growing up in late 20th century America, then entering middle age in a new century, finding many of his icons and friends gone, or at least distant. Trinidad's poetry unfailingly brings these friends and treasures back to life in work that is disarmingly daily and toes the line between formal and informal. And yet, Trinidad's poetry is much more than memoir and reveries on TV land artifacts located via eBay. Explicit sex is another kind of subject matter he uses to decorate his songs, as in the chant-like early poem Lover, which begins, quote, "My lover who is black, my lover who is blonde, my lover who is Italian, my lover who is well hung," etc. In this poem, I can hear some of the daily language, litany-like verse of Trinidad's Brooklyn College professor, Allen Ginsberg. There are also tender love songs in the commonality of Trinidad's oeuvre, nor does he shy away from the brutality embedded in the dystopia of the American dream. In this, Trinidad's work has something in common with LA visual artists Mike Kelly and Raymond Pettibone. That we can use the word oeuvre to speak of David Trinidad's work tells us something important. That over the years, working with iconic material of daily life, some of it kitsch, some of it simply mundane, Trinidad has amassed a monumental body of work that no one could have predicted. He is here tonight with the key to unlock this magic kingdom for us. Let's put our hands together and give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for that introduction. I'm going to read an excerpt from my most recent book and then a couple of new poems. For Peyton Place, a haiku soap opera, I watched all 514 episodes of the 1960s primetime soap opera and wrote a haiku for every one. And this took about 3.5 years, which was a sort of equal parts pleasure and syllabic torture. So I'm going to read the first 31 haiku. They're from season 1, which aired in 1964. And sometimes I use the characters' names and sometimes the actors, but it really doesn't matter. You just imagine a lot of soap opera people with soap opera problems and a progressively bored poet watching them. Peyton Place, a haiku soap opera. Dolorous premiere, worth it for tidal wave of Dorothy Malone's hair. Ryan O'Neal fresh from shower, eyes glued to bare chest, bulge in towel. Betty has morning sickness, Rod and Allison a date, Norm wet pits. Every episode, that same couple keeps crossing the street hand in hand. Malone mugs with her jaw, open mouth. O'Neal takes off his tennis shirt. Small-town slut Betty ditches buff Bud to chase Rod, the hunk who dumped her. Stars, I have seen them fall. Dreamy Mia Farrow quotes A.E. Houseman. Who's she quoting now? Something about leaves and snow. No hits on Google. Close-up of Barbara's pained face. Pause DVD. Count every single mole. Contagious coiffure, a surfer could shoot the curl in Betty's mom's hair. Betty finally tells Rod she's preggers, but car crash should take care of that. Blonde nurse looks like she was separated at birth from Julia Stiles. First she can't tell him that she's knocked up, now she can't tell him that she's not. If you had to choose Connie's art or the owl lamp at the Andersons, despite his bad hair, Norman's hot. Great playground shot, his ass in white pants. Can we talk about Constance McKenzie's big fat black false eyelashes? The only title in paperback rack I can make out is The Robe. Watched this episode twice and still can't come up with idea for haiku. At the hospital, everyone's too worried to notice the Grant Wood. Odd frame, Norman bent over water fountain. Is he giving Dad head? So much depended upon sponsors. Peyton Place was brought to you by. Note the orderly, no lines, but that look he gives Malone speaks volumes. Lies, secrets, gossip, and fucked up families make this black and white world tick. Both brothers shirtless in Norman's bedroom. Who cares what's in Mother's will? Did Dorothy dream I'd gape 45 years later at her queer blonde hair? For days I haven't been able to get the theme song out of my head. After the credits, autumn leaves litter the path. Jealous George gets smashed. Full moon, mist, Rossi filmed through the neck of a lab flask. Very arty. Morality, truth, courage, integrity, big words for the small screen. Will George see a shrink? Carson be paroled? Connie have a cavity? Confessions and hard facts, secret exits, fake snow, I have seen it fall. This is the continuing story of Peyton Place. And it continues for quite some time. I recently asked my students at Columbia College to memorize a Dickinson poem, and I did the same. So I thought I would read mine tonight. It's number 301 from the Johnson version. I reason earth is short, and anguish absolute, and many hurt, but what of that? I reason we could die. The best vitality cannot excel decay, but what of that? I reason that in heaven, somehow it will be even, some new equation given, but what of that? God, that was, it was easier in the classroom. And that was to clear the palate. For the past year or so, I've been working on a manuscript of intimate memoir-esque poems. Sorry. I think I was drinking from the wrong water. About the years I lived in New York in 1988 to 2002. So I'm going to read 3 of those. The title of this first one, "The Radiator is Clanking," is part of the first sentence. The radiator is clanking as if someone's hammering on the pipes, time to get up, and Byron is at the door barking. He hears Obie Benz climbing the stairs to his office, the loft above us. Obie made a documentary in the late 80s, Heavy Petting, in which celebrities like Allen Ginsberg, Sandra Bernhard, Laurie Anderson, and William S. Burroughs confessed their first sexual experiences that did quite well. Byron, we never properly trained him, so such pleas are pointless. Still, we yell, "Shh, quiet, shut the fuck up." Byron looks at us, baffled for a second, then goes right on barking. I finally pull myself out of bed. Blessedly, I don't teach today. Ira sits at the kitchen table reading the Times. I am no longer interested in the news. From the left front window of our loft facing Spring Street, we can see part of the Empire State Building, a reminder when I do notice it, how lucky I am to be here. Lucky? Amazed might be closer to the truth. Often, walking down the street or hailing a cab, I think, you actually live here in New York City, where you always, since you read Valley of the Dolls as a teenager, wanted to be. The glamour instantly disappears when the next person bumps me, intentionally, without saying I'm sorry. Nothing makes me angrier. Laura, my therapist, says it requires constant negotiation, too many people crowded into too small a space. I try to imagine myself old in Manhattan, walking a different Cairn Terrier, Byron would be gone by then, sitting alone in a brown booth at the Knickerbocker, but can't. This city is for the young or the rich. I've never really liked it, would probably have left after graduate school if I hadn't met Ira. I tell myself and others that the relationship is all that's keeping me here. Everyone who was going to die has died, for the time being at any rate. Many I once counted as friends are no longer in my life. We still give dinner parties. Who comes? Wayne Kestenbaum, Susan and Philip, a lesbian couple I'm ambivalent about. After Eileen, I'm ambivalent about all lesbians. Gary, Betsy, Linda, Lynn, more Ira's friends than mine. I see Elaine on my own, and Jeffrey, my therapist. I can't figure out if she's lesbian. Is there no one else I can count on? I've quit smoking, the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than giving up alcohol and drugs, and started collecting toys from my childhood. Firmly in my mid-40s, there's plenty of time to waste. Somehow I know this. When Ira launches his own agency, he leases the loft below us and sets up his offices there. Obi rarely works late, so at night we have the building to ourselves. I read how Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, at the height of their stardom, booked the hotel rooms above, below, and on either side of theirs to ensure privacy. I pretend that Ira and I are the gay equivalent of Irving Mansfield and Jacqueline Suzanne. The Sunday Times, I do read Arts and Leisure, strewn all over the green pinstripe duvet cover on our queen-size bed, not enough room for a king. Byron is our Josephine. At the kitchen table, I write a long, skinny poem in Byron's voice, Every Night Byron, a week in the life of an urbane canine. Byron sits at my feet whenever I work on it, as if he knows what I'm up to. His vigil ends as soon as I finish the poem. Ira objects that I refer to us as one, for the most part, happy little alternative family. That's how Byron sees us, I say. Another lesbian couple, both named Debbie, that we used to hang out with, that I was also ambivalent about, once told us they'd made a vow to always stay together. In my heart, but not my head, I know Ira and I will not. While Ira is in London on business, I read a book on the Zodiac Killer, a garish yellow, red, and black true crime paperback that keeps me awake. I obsessively check the locks on the door and the windows, the fire escape gate. Must I, for the rest of my life, bar windows and doors against the Manson family, the Zodiac, Richard Speck? Byron would be no help. He'd probably want an intruder to throw his pink squeak toy. Yet he'll wait at the door for Obi's footsteps, run to the front windows to bark at a motorcyclist revving his bike. I sit at the middle window and watch them film a scene from Sex and the City, Sarah Jessica Parker and her red-headed sidekick walking down West Broadway, talking about their love lives, no doubt. Soho has been transformed, overnight it seems, although it must have been gradual, from a relatively quiet neighborhood that came alive nights there were openings at art galleries, into a teeming mecca of high-end clothing stores. The sidewalks, especially on weekends, thick with tourists and shoppers, street vendors hawking tacky t-shirts and third-rate paintings. It's impossible to walk Byron when it's this crowded without some kind of altercation. I don't leave the apartment all weekend if I can help it, and suffer when Ira isn't around to take Byron out. Nights, too, are noisier. Every brute from Jersey, Long Island, and the other boroughs comes into Manhattan to let loose. On St. Patrick's Day, the Empire State, a lit emerald encased in mist, revelers yell, smash glass, and get into fistfights. The big reading at St. Mark's Church for the Norton Anthology of Postmodern Poetry approaches. I dread being in the same room as Eileen. The morning of, I decide to burn all her letters to me. Why should I cherish them when she clearly has no regard for my friendship? Destroying them will free, secretly empower me, I think. Ira eggs me on. I filled the kitchen sink with years of correspondence, letters and postcards with her sloppy handwriting and scrawl of a signature, which I used to treasure, photographs, manuscripts, poems I asked her to write out by hand, the downward squiggle on the blue cover of Sappho's boat that she drew for me and signed, which I always meant to have framed. I light the match. Ira fans the smoke toward the open window. How I loved receiving word from her, first in my studio in Hollywood, then after I got sober, my studio in Silver Lake. When she stayed with me at the latter, she ruined my yellow tea kettle while I was at work, turned on the burner underneath it, then forgot, went out to the courtyard to sunbathe. I didn't care about the tea kettle at the time, but 10 years later, analyzing our friendship with Laura, I did care that she didn't apologize or offer to replace it. Once, I sent her a magazine with 2 of my new poems. Tim's Stolen Sweater was one of them. She wrote back, "The best of David." That had meant so much to me. Now as I feed the letter to the flames, her messy black handwriting crumples to ash. I wake with a start from an afternoon nap, Byron curled at my feet. I'd dozed off while reading Seth Speaks. Just a few pages of his "You create your own reality" channelings make my head heavy. Byron growls, jumps off the bed, runs barking to the door as Obie Benz descends the stairs. I don't know or care where Ira is. It's beginning to get dark. As I fall back asleep, Byron's barking fades. This is how I am creating my middle age. I wrote this poem. Actually, I wrote both of these poems about a week ago, and I didn't intend to read this one tonight, but since I mentioned Dia in it twice, I feel that I must. Poets. At the dinner after his Dia reading, A, whom I'd been seated next to, turned to me and said, "I read Plasticville. It was strange." I didn't ask him what he meant by strange. His comment just hung there in the uneasy air between us. After I gave a reading at Bennington College, B, who taught there, said, "That was strange." I didn't ask him in what way. In a Thai restaurant in Chicago during AWP, I told C, a Pulitzer winner, what A and B had said. "They're both academic poets," he said, "and you're not." He was coughing and sneezing with a new cold, which I kept mentally protecting myself against. At one point, he blew his nose and a string of snot caught on his salt and pepper beard. I didn't tell him. Dee told me that when she went clothes shopping with E, a Pulitzer winner, E said to her, "If it fits, buy 6. And that when E and F, her poet husband, got divorced, F called E a charlatan. That bothered her, as would the outcries of favoritism when poetry went after her. G told me that at a poet's dinner in New York, E refused to acknowledge him. She would only talk to the other Pulitzer winners at the table. H told me that when she was E's student, she would have killed for her. I thought, killed? Like a Manson chick? When my name came up at a dinner party at which Ira was present, Jay, a Pulitzer winner, who obviously didn't know Ira and I were dating, said snidely, "Yes, the famous David Trinidad." It stung when Ira told me. Why should Jay, who had such power in the poetry world, resent my tiny slice of success? When I told Kay, an FSG poet, what Jay had said, he said, "After he's dead, no one's going to give a fuck about his work." A story that went around, L, a secondary beat poet, drunk at a downtown bar, bragged that once M, beat poet supreme, died, he, L, was going to be numero uno. Ira was incensed when N, poet turned novelist, tried to pitch his manuscript to him at Cookie Mueller's funeral. As was I when I heard that O, without a doubt the most successful poet in America, said about P, one of his closest friends and his better, "Yes, but he didn't go to Harvard." Both O and P, for the record, were Pulitzer winners. A well-known artist told me, we were walking down University Place after a book party at Teachers and Writers, that O had recently told him all he wanted was to win the Nobel Prize so he could tell everyone to fuck off. I thought, but he already does that. When I met Q, who was reading with R, his poet wife, he said, "I thought your hair would be different." That puzzled me, but I didn't ask him to explain. Someone, I forget who, called R and Q two sharp operators. It was rumored that Q swung both ways. Speaking of coiffures, a fiction writer in LA once said S, one of the few women associated with the beat movement, was just a sweep of hair. T, a great source of gossip, told me that U, the father of confessional poetry, once asked V, who would later become New York State Poet Laureate, if she wanted to meet W, the suicide poet. V asked what's she like. U replied, "She's drunk and egotistical, just like in her poems." V said, "In that case, no, I'll pass." Life is perpetually unfair, X told me when I brought her to read at Columbia College. Her poetry was okay. The real appeal was that she'd been W's best friend. I took her to the Art Institute where, over lunch, she told me J was one of her least favorite poets. They'd read together at DIA. When I asked her what she thought of the proliferation of poets in recent years, she said, "I have a solution. Each one, shoot one." She expressed interest in my work. I wasn't about to foist it on her, so I sent her a copy of Plasticville, from which she derived no intellectual pleasure. So she said in an email, I had yet to fully exploit my talent. At a dinner during a Y, the other suicide poet, conference, I was seated next to Z, who'd come down with a cold I was afraid of catching. She casually turned to me and said, "Your poems terrify me." "Why?" I, at long last, asked. "Because you just come out and say it." I need another alphabet. I think that poem proves you don't need a Nobel Prize to tell everyone to fuck off. And you know, one of the high points of my years in New York was being friends with James Schuyler and being present for his momentous reading at DIA in 1988. So I thought it would be fitting to end my DIA reading with a poem for Jimmy. The title, A Few Pink Minutes, is a phrase from one of his poems. A few pink minutes. I'd come out of the subway at 7th Avenue and walk west on 23rd Street until I reached the red brick and black balustrade facade of the Hotel Chelsea, enter through the glass doors and wait in the lobby. I was always early smoke a cigarette or two, and soak up the seedy glamour. Every inch of wall space covered with the atrocious art of previous tenants, an elderly lady taking her equally elderly terrier for a walk, and young rockers 10 years too late for punk, ragged sleeveless denim flaunting pale skeletal arms. When it was time, I'd ride an elevator. There were two to choose from, one on either side of the front desk, to the 6th floor. Once, a blonde girl stood at the end of the white hall watching me. A ghost? She could have been. Otherwise, it was usually empty, hushed. I'd knock on the door, 625, and he'd welcome me into his one-room world. Single bed with mussed-up sheets. I don't think I ever saw it made. Television, desk, a leaning tower of LPs, handsome Brooke Benton on top, and books, shelves of them, but I only remember the portrait of a lady. I was reading it for a lit class, and Elizabeth Bishop's North and South, which I handled like the Holy Grail. A dull yellow file cabinet, 2-drawer, locked. He kept cash and unfinished poems in it. A low bedside table, lamp, push-button phone, lots of pill bottles and clutter. White shuttered doors slid closed on the kitchenette. On the walls, art from the covers of the Crystal Lithium in a Few Days, Fairfield Porter's watercolor, Frothing Purple Waves, Dara's painting, verdure rife with pink and lavender. The Porter, as I recall, was beginning to slip out of its frame. In the bathroom, a green bottle. I practice this so. in the bathroom, a green bottle, Ayacho violets, the cologne he splashes on himself in the poem he gave me for Brooklyn Review. By the door, stacks of mysteries. He had a soft spot for Elmore Leonard, spines heavily creased. Bouts of insomnia, those stacks would grow a bit taller between visits. Barbara, the cat he adopted when Tom left for the friary in San Francisco, was curled somewhere. I don't remember ever petting her or her coming to me. Aloof, depressed. After one visit, I wrote a sketch of his room. If I hadn't, certain details would be lost to me. An oak leaf taped to a mirror, an orange and white scarf laid over the typewriter, 3 small apples on the TV, a can of Diet Pepsi, yellow and salmon carnations in the blue bottle on the file cabinet. At the end of another visit, I fetched him a BLT from the Greasy Spoon on the corner of 8th Avenue. At the end of another, before heading back to Brooklyn, I sat in an armchair near the French doors and watched, through the wrought iron flowers of the balustrade, a sunset that was pure Freilicher, sky a haze of blue-gray above smokestacks and shadowy brick, transfixed for a few pink minutes. Thank you.